This month we're looking at the topic, You Hold the Key. But first of all, I'd like to say Happy Father's Day to everyone out there who has fathered in some way or another. I had the privilege of speaking on Mother's Day, and now I have the honor of speaking on Father's Day. And in my mind, fathering and mothering, it's parenting. It's pretty similar. And so as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, what exactly makes the difference in our minds? Sometimes we experience our mothers and our fathers quite differently. And sometimes we experience the absence of one of them differently also. And so I think as we look at that, it's due largely because of society telling us, well, this is what a mother does and this is what a father does. So that's what Ernest Holmes would call race consciousness. But it also, I think, has to do with personalities. Some fathers do what we think mothers should do, and some mothers are more like what the fathers should do, and it's their personality that makes that difference. And as we heard in the reading, Ernest Holmes said that we are all points of personality in limitless mind. Every one of us is an expression of spirit in the form of some sort of personality. So surprisingly, my father doesn't believe in any certain teaching. He doesn't attend any church. And yet what he taught me is really the foundation of what we teach here. And I think that's largely why I feel so comfortable here, why this feels like a good fit for me. Science of Mind and this teaching really jives with what my father taught me. So the only four-letter word we weren't allowed to say at home was can't. All the other words were okay. They were just words, and he uses them quite frequently to express himself. And we were okay with that, but can't is a word we were not allowed to use because he taught me, and he taught my brother, that we could do whatever we wanted as long as we put our mind to it. And he taught me that being a girl was no excuse. And in my day and age, a lot of girls didn't hear that. He wanted me to learn a lot of things that were traditionally what boys did. And I struggled with that. I cannot throw a baseball the way he wanted me to. But he believed that being a girl was no excuse. And so for that, I'm extremely grateful that he taught me essentially what I set my mind to, what I think, that's the reality that creates what I get to experience. Essentially, he taught me that we hold the key. He also reminded me and my brother many times at the end of his finger, you are not average. Average work is not acceptable. You are above average. And so he put that bar very high. He expected above average, and he brought out in us above average results. So again, he was teaching me that we can achieve what it is we believe about ourselves. We can, what we focus on is what we end up getting. He was also adamant about the fact that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. He said over and over, think for yourself. Don't be a sheep and follow the crowd. And so when I read in Ernest Holmes that he said, figure this out for yourself. Try this on. See if it works. Don't believe it just because I'm telling you. I was like, okay, that sounds like my dad. You know, this made it more doable for me to try on these principles and see how they worked. Because it wasn't just do as I say because I say so. And that is not the way I was raised. So this fit. Ernest Holmes also taught principle isn't based in precedence, and I've said that many times from up here. And we often refer to that as if you're trying to do something again and you have experienced trying it before, sometimes our mind goes, oh, but every time I try and do this, it doesn't work, or I just can't do that. And so that is when we say, well, principle isn't based in precedence and encourage you to try again, because each new time you try is a new experience. And I looked at that phrase a little differently sometimes. Principle isn't based in precedence. I take that when someone says, well, but we've always done it this way. There's your precedence. Principle isn't based in that. Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean we have to continue doing it that way. And again, that was something that my father taught me. Just if I said, well, everybody else gets to, I could pretty much guarantee that meant I was not going to get to, because he did not believe in that, well, just because everybody else or everybody's doing it this way, we have to do it that way. We had to figure out ways to present things to him that were our own thinking, our own discernment, and saying, this is what I want to do because. And so that, again, is very in keeping for me with what we teach here at Science of Mind. Ernest Holmes talks about the fact that we can overcome race consciousness. Yes, there's race consciousness out there. There's the way our culture and our community thinks. But we don't have to subscribe to that. We don't have to follow that. We can figure out for ourselves, does that make sense? Is that what I want to follow? Is that how I want to believe? So essentially, again, my father taught us that we hold the key to our success and to our happiness. So because of that, I want to dedicate the rest of this talk very gratefully to my father, and also to all the fathers out there, anyone who has taken time in their life to inspire, to teach, to uplift, to cheer on, or to parent someone in their life. That's an important role. So today I wanted to begin by talking about the fact that a little history about the Centers for Spiritual Living, which is our overall movement, the title or the name of our overall movement. And in the Science of Mind magazine for May, well, recently actually in the Science of Mind magazines, they've been putting a timeline in here where it shows what's happening in our movement and what's happening in the world. And they put those things together so you can see how they sort of blended throughout history. And one of the things they put in the May Science of Mind magazine was an article about the fact that in the 1950s, the early 1950s, the organization that had started as the Science of Mind teaching split apart. And one piece went one direction and one piece went the other direction. So you might be surprised to know that in a teaching that's all about oneness, we're all one and we're all connected, that this very organization's had a split. And that split lasted over 60 years. Yeah. So I started thinking about that, and I thought, well, what causes splits? What causes splits between people, within organizations, in relationships, in partnerships, in marriages, between peoples, between nations and states, and if you look at our own United States, between the citizens of this country? What causes those splits? Yeah. Because we teach oneness, and we teach that oneness is the truth of who we are. In fact, not only do we teach it, I took an astronomy class, and the teacher was basically saying every one of us and everything in this world and in the universe is made out of the same star stuff. When the universe sort of did what it did, everything in us is the same. We're all connected with the stuff that we're made out of. We say we're made of God stuff. Everything is made of God stuff. Whatever term, star stuff, God stuff, the idea is that we're all one. We're made out of the same stuff. And so in some ways we could say those kinds of splits aren't natural or divinely ordained. So what causes them? The last time that I spoke, I talked about the fact that our class, Shortcut to a Miracle, had basically boiled down every want, every desire, and every need to underneath all of us wanting to be loved, all of us wanting to express love, and all of us wanting to feel connected with someone in some way. That is the basis of what we all really want underneath everything we say we want. And we also teach that all fear and anger, underneath it is a feeling of separation, of not being connected. And so part of what we do is try and teach people how to regain that feeling of connection. Practitioners work with you to regain your sense of oneness with all it is, with that which created you and those within your life. And so we often talk about creating a world that works for everyone. And that's actually going to be August's theme, a world that works for everyone. And I propose that we will have a world that works for everyone when everyone really knows, believes, and feels that they are one with everyone else, that we are all connected, and that they are one with their source, however they describe that or believe that to be. So you might have noticed that I've used the word feeling a lot. We want to feel loved. We want to feel loving. We want to feel lovable. We want to feel connected. Because the truth is we already are. We are love. We are loved, and we are connected. But we don't always feel it. We don't always recognize it. We don't always choose to love. And we don't always actually choose to feel love. That's a choice. And so sometimes I've heard people say, well, I'm sorry, Reverend Bonnie, but, and I know when I hear those words, there's a doozy coming after the but. I've heard from several people. Well, I'm just sorry, Reverend Bonnie, but I just don't want to be one with those kind of people. Or I don't want to be around those kind of people. Or I just can't accept what those people are doing. And those people can be anything from terrorists to abusers, child molesters, the homeless, gay, Muslim, Democrat, Republican, you name it. I've heard it. I've heard it all. So we may not want to be one with or connected to various types of people and the things that they do, but our wanting to doesn't change the fact that we are. I might take my shoes off and my feet might stink. And I might not want to smell my feet, and I might not want to even be connected to my feet. But think about it. So how do we find and experience and feel happiness when we might also see and even experience separation and division and splits between people and between ourselves and other people? We are either witnessing or we're experiencing it. So when I read about the split in our organization that took place back in the early 50s, I first of all realized that Ernest Holmes was still alive. And I thought, how is it possible that the founder of this teaching, I mean, he was bringing into it, this teaching is old, that we're all one, but the founder of this movement is still alive, and yet the movement sort of out from under him split apart. How was that possible? How was it that what he was teaching moved people in two different directions? And so I thought about it and realized a lot of it was probably personalities. And when I say personalities, I'm talking about that outward expression of all kinds of inner thoughts and emotions and experiences that we all bring to whatever table we're moving up to. So what makes our personality? What creates what it is that we're expressing as personality? Is it the stars? Is it where the planets were aligned when we were born? Is it our DNA? Is it the environment we were raised in? Ernest Holmes talks about personality and individuality as sort of a similar thing, that it's how spirit expresses through us. And so, boy, this is really, it's moving. Try that. There we go. Sorry. The real self is God-given and cannot be denied. It is the place where God comes to a point of individualized and personified expression. Individuality means self-choice, volition, conscious mind, personified spirit, complete freedom, and a power to back up that freedom. That's that individualized expression. Holmes also said, spirit is changeless reality. That which we call personality is the instrument through which spirit operates. But spirit can operate for the individual only by operating through him or her. Spirit is never bound by the form it takes. So think about that when we think about what we like and we don't like. Spirit is never bound by the form it takes and is not affected by any apparent cause or condition. it is forever free. Spirit not only fills all forms, but surges around them and through them. Ice is formed from water. All ice is some form of water. Just so, God and us humans exist in an eternal state of unity. The solid and the liquid are one substance. And so we might look out there and say, ooh, that person got frozen into some form that I really don't like. But they're still made out of the same stuff we are. And so how do you get ice to turn back into its God self? Warm it up. We can warm it up with love and compassion and see those forms melt back into the truth of who they are, their God selves. So I'm sure many of you have heard the story of the blind men and the elephant. Yeah. So the blind men are feeling different parts of the elephant, and they're describing what an elephant is. So if they have the tail, the elephant is whatever they feel the tail to be like. If they have the trunk, it's whatever that feeling of a trunk is, or the ears, or the underbelly, or the feet. And each one of them believes that they're feeling the whole truth of what that elephant is. And so that, I also believe, is part of what we do in our own lives when we're trying to describe spirit or truth. We have the piece of it that we're familiar with, and we hold on to that as if it's the all-encompassing part of the truth. So if you think about some of the wars and conflicts and splits that we are familiar with in this world right now, and maybe even some in your life, think about Israel and Palestine. Think about what happened in Ireland between the Catholics and the Protestants. Think about what's happening for the Muslims, the Shia and Sunni. Think about all the different facets of Christianity and what they've done to and among each other. Think about the United States and the Republicans and the Democrats and the Greens and the Independents. Each one believes they have a part of the elephant that's true. Each one believes that they're describing what is the wholeness, the truth of it, and each one believes that their part is not connected to any stinky part. That's true. So several weeks ago in the Sacred Circle, I joined them for their discussion. And so I encourage you to, if you have time on Mondays from 10:30 to 11:30, the discussions are great. They take articles from the Science of Mind, and they discuss what the article is about and how it impacts their life. And I do want to encourage you also that if that time doesn't work, but you would like to meet with other people to have similar discussions, let me know. One of our goals is to get some of these sacred circles started out in the community and at different times and in different places. So the discussion the day that I joined them was around what Reverend Dr. Jesse Jennings, his articles, what he does is responds to questions that people write into him. So the question that was written into him for the discussion we had is, how do I reconcile my spiritual practice with my alarm at where America appears to be heading? Now, the article's long. I'm not going to read it all to you, but the beginning, the very first thing he says is, this is done by focusing mentally and emotionally more on what you prefer to experience than on what you do not. Then he has a few more things to say, and then he says, this country as a whole is an outpicturing of the consciousness of everyone who calls it home, or would like to, or who has a feeling about it at all anywhere. Now that really was something I had to think about, because in our Shortcut to a Miracle class, we've been talking about what happens with our thoughts and how they move into that potentiality, that field of potentiality. And so I hadn't even thought about it that way, that this country is not only an expression of those of us who call this home, but also of those who want to call it home, and those who anywhere in the world have an opinion about who we are and what we do. All of that thought is going out into the field of potentiality. Then he says, but you need not remain at the effect of this miscellany of opinion in your personal experience. So we're moving from the broad into your personal. You are the final creative agent, the supreme court, so to speak, in your own life. No matter what has come before, precedents, or the limitations imposed by others. Then he continues, many people right now on either side of the political divide are concerned about the erosion of their own rights and people they love or empathize with. Some are led to take vocal political action, others quietly hope for the best. All should pray not only for things to come out right, but for the resolve to know that one life, it hasn't stopped being just that. So that also spoke to me. That not only do we pray for the outcome, and usually when we're praying for the outcome to look like we want it to, so our part of the elephant, but also remember to pray for a deeper resolve, a deeper understanding, to know that that oneness principle that we believe in is still in action. It's still true. Then he said also pray to have a deeper resolve to know that love has not slipped from its place as the central flame of the universe. So as we remember that and keep our focus there, that helps to move us toward a greater unity. Whatever repair you feel society needs to undergo, imagine that it has already happened. So imagine what that would look like. Imagine that it's already happened, and then describe to yourself the world as beautiful, workable, and hospitable. Then carry that vision into all actions that follow. And then he has a little bit more to say, and he wraps it up with, return regularly to the scene of the peaceful planet your heart tells you is possible. So there is his explanation for how do we handle this, what do? We keep our focus and our vision on what we know is possible, what we want to see and what we want to experience in this world, whether we're experiencing splits or not. Whether there's divisions in our life or not, we can still hold that vision of what it is we want to experience. And so in the article where they were talking about Ernest Holmes' experience with the split in our organization, I thought it was interesting that they included a sentence from a letter that they say is the last bit of correspondence that we are aware of that he wrote. And this is what Ernest Holmes said. Of course, I know the whole thing will come back together when the right time comes, merely because it is the logical thing to do. And I think in the long run, common sense usually wins. Now, I thought it was interesting. He didn't say because God ordained it. He didn't say, something out there is going to make it happen. He said it's the logical thing. And common sense will bring this organization back together. And so the beginning of the article, in demonstration of the core spiritual principle of oneness, the Centers for Spiritual Living was officially established just 5 years ago, March 1st in 2012, having emerged almost a century before in 1927 is when this started. Then diverging into two factions in the 1950s, the spiritual movement reunified after almost 60 years, and now we're under one single banner focused on the universal truths it has always espoused. And so Ernest Holmes held that vision. He saw the oneness regardless of what was happening, even within the movement that he was a part of and that he had started. So I hope you don't think that I'm just all love, 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 we're all one, the kumbaya that I know a lot of you talk about that we experience here. Because I, too, have experienced splits in my life and divisions. And I have experienced the stinky feet I'd like to walk away from. And there are people and ways of behaving in the world that challenge me and my ability to either feel loved from them or to express love to them. So because of that, throughout the years, especially since I've been involved in religious science, I've worked personally on a practice that allows me to continually think about our oneness as often as I possibly can. And so I have that sentence going through my head a lot of the time. We're all one. When I see something, I just tell myself, we are all one. And that brings me back to that center, that truth. So sometimes I might be in a parking lot and somebody comes toward me and I know they're going to ask for money or they're going to want something from me. And I tell myself first, we are all one. That shifts how I'm going to interact with this person. And sometimes people push my buttons. And when that starts to happen in my own personal life, I have to go within and say, first of all, we are one. So what's going on here? As one, is there something still in me that needs to be healed? Is there something that's not resolved? Is there something that I still need to forgive someone or something? And that allows me to remember, as I keep that we are one in the, constantly like a mantra, it helps me to remember that there's work that I need to do. And if they're showing up and pushing my buttons, that means there's still something in here that needs to be done. So in Shortcut to a Miracle, one of the things, there's a whole chapter on what keeps us from getting what we want in our life. And a lot of it, as I shared 2 weeks ago, has to do with that negative thinking, the stuff that comes up. And so they say in here, in most cases, when we experience guilt, regret, or resentment, and for me, those button-pushing things start to cause resentment sometimes, we think that the way we feel is the right way to feel, and we are certain that everyone else in the same circumstances would feel the exact same way. Usually, we think it's the only way to feel and that we really can't change it. Worse yet, the more we think about it, the more we justify our position, and the more susceptible we become to similar pain. No matter how long the negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions have been around, no matter how strong they are, and no matter how well-founded we may feel they are, this is an important principle that applies. They are negative patterns of thinking, and we can change them. The fact is, the incident does not create the negative emotion. We create it ourselves by placing guilt or blame either on ourselves or on someone else. So it's back to our thinking is what causes the splits, the divisions, those divides that we experience. And that thinking, of course, is what expresses as our personality. So the other thing that I try and do is remember that each situation is new. Like I said before, principle isn't based in precedence. So each time I'm interacting with someone or in some situation, it's new. So what makes it new? Me. I hold the key to my own feelings, my own reactions, and my own happiness. I can make that situation a new experience. And so I keep my focus then on what it is I want, that world that works for everyone. And then I do sometimes remind myself that we all have quirks. We all have stinky feet sometimes. But love them anyway. Love them and myself through it. And finally, I also remind myself that just because we're all one doesn't mean that we all get into the same bed, doesn't mean that we all live under the same roof, and sometimes it even means we don't all worship or celebrate spirit in the same way and in the same buildings. That doesn't change the fact that we are all one. So I realize there's a reason why there's a distance between my nose and my feet. And I started to think about those 60 years when our organization was split. And I realized that love didn't stop happening through the people that were taking this movement into the world. Spirit was still alive and working through the two factions of our organization. And our teaching was still valid. And a lot of people benefited from that time that this teaching was moving through those 60 years. So I thought, well, we can wash our feet off, and then they might start to stink again. And so we are grateful for that distance sometimes, but we're still one with those feet, because where would we be without them? And then sometimes we can learn how to wash our feet and keep them from smelling. And when I mentioned that I should have come up with a different title for this, Larry said, yeah, you just don't wear shoes anymore. So there's ways to create feet that don't stink. There's ways for us to figure out how personalities can come back together. So what changed after those 60 years that made it possible to bring this organization back together? Well, some of the personalities had changed. and that outward expression had changed, and the race consciousness, what was going on in the world around us, had changed. And yet I realized that love, the teaching, that truth, that unity, and that spirit had lived through it all. And then I thought, well, we don't have to just die and let other people come into our place to make better relationships between us and others. Again, it goes back to our thinking. We can shift our thinking, and we can remember our oneness and allow that unification to happen. As they said in the article, we decided our teaching of oneness gave us reason to walk our talk. We decided. We held the key all along. We changed our thinking. We decided to walk our talk. We decided to remember our oneness and our unity with all people, including those who were teaching the same thing we were. So some final words from Ernest Holmes. Life lies open to me, rich, full, abundant. My thought, which is my key to life, our thought is our key to life, opens all doors for me. I am one with infinity, divinity. I realize this unity. I proceed on my way as one who knows that God goes with me into eternal day of infinite privilege. I have only to open the portals of my soul and accept that which is ready to express through me. Today I fling these portals wide. Today I am the instrument through which life flows. We hold the key. We put that key into our heart. We turn it in our soul. We open those portals wide open, and we allow life and love to move in and through us. And I believe that what our organization was able to do, even after 60 years of a split, it took 5 years of work to bring that back together, people talking, but they kept their hearts open and their minds focused on unity and oneness. That was a microcosm of what we can see happening in our country and in our world. And if we can see it happening, if we can keep our focus there, we know it's a possibility and we know it will happen. It's the only logical thing that we can do. We hold the key to unlock our hearts. We hold the key to swing those doors wide open. We hold the key to keeping our consciousness rooted in love. We hold the key to our happiness. And so it is.